Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of The Founder Files. Today I've got another e-commerce king for you on this episode. I'm speaking to the CEO and founder of Zulzi.com, Donald Valoyi. Now, if you don't know about Zulzi, Zulzi is a grocery delivery marketplace, and currently in terms of size, there are about 150 people, and they're able to deliver your groceries in as little as 15 minutes, which I think is absolutely incredible, especially in that kind of business that's so logistics heavy and there's so many complexities involved. To be able to meet that kind of delivery time in such a short amount of time and really follow through with it, I think is absolutely fantastic. So in this episode, we start off first as how the business started off in terms of selling books and then dresses, and then eventually got into groceries and how we went through those pivoting journeys. We talk about the growth and cash flow challenges that he experienced after finding product market fit within the grocery space, specifically when they were doing mostly picking and packing at grocery stores themselves, and the challenges of actually having the cash to be able to purchase these groceries to give to customers as demand started to soar, and how he managed that as a true entrepreneur does. Then in between that, because it's such a strong business when it comes to technology, we really get into how he's able to maintain these experiences of quality, customer satisfaction, and consistency that led to word of mouth marketing happening that essentially quadrupled the number of customers in the business within a day. Within all that, he shares his mindset and how he continues to innovate by constantly understanding the market, constantly understanding the customers, and constantly being the life within the business as the entrepreneur. But then how he makes sure he balances that without, stepping on people's toes within the business, as he constantly shifts between each department to understand the problems, but allows his people within the company to run their functions as well. He shares quite a bit about that, which is great for any entrepreneur in the scaling era. And finally, we talk about how he was able to evolve the business into the dark stores that it is now, to move from the picking and packing and vertically integrate his own supply chain so they have the warehouses, and how that was a bit more painful than expected in the beginning part of the journey, and how they developed the lessons and executed on that as they went through it at this new scale of pivot, as he would describe it. So, as per usual, there are so many unbelievable lessons here from an entrepreneur around how they are rolling up their sleeves, getting involved with innovation, and building a really amazing business in the South African landscape that is an inspiration in terms of tech, but also in terms of something that's driving real value to customers and amazing customer experience. So pity they're not in Cape Town, because Zulzi is something that I'd definitely love to try. So Donald, when you listen to this, let me know when you're coming down to Cape Town and when Zulzi's coming to Cape Town, because you've definitely got a customer here. And now to you, the listeners, if you want to make sure that you constantly hear amazing stories about founders doing epic things within South Africa and how they've had to go through pivot in order to be able to scale, and you want to learn from their lessons to make sure that you can avoid the same trial and error process and you can achieve scale faster, then you really want to make sure that you're following the Founder Files if you're not already. So make sure that you're following us on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, so you don't miss another episode from amazing founders like Donald. But that's it from me. Let's get straight into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Valoyi. Welcome to The Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Donald, welcome to the Founder Files. It's great to have another e-commerce player, and a successful one at that, to join the podcast. I've had quite a few people from the e-commerce arena on the podcast this season, and you are another one, and I can't wait to hear your unique model in your business, because you're very well differentiated to who else is out there in the market. And I think you've got some amazing lessons to share with the founders that we have about scaling and having an innovative business based on technology. So welcome to the podcast. I can't wait to get into it.
No, Cameron, thank you so much for the invite. And looking forward to really share our story and our journey with all the founders out there. So it's my pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited and looking forward to share our journey with you.
So I've already laid you up and I guess put you on a pedestal for the audience, saying that you've got this really awesome, innovative business and model based on technology. So I guess just to appease the audience, now that I've laid you up like that, do you mind just explaining the business and the business model and how Zulzi works as a company?
Yeah, so what we do as Zulzi is we operate a model where we pick groceries from stickers from our dark stores. So as a customer, you can actually order groceries from us and we deliver to you between 15 to 20 minutes. We also offer from our stickers. So as a customer, what it means you can actually buy a Panado, Disprin, and use your medical aid or upload your prescription on our platform and get it delivered to you very quickly. So that's the model that we operate as Zulzi.
Yeah, very cool that you can operate this through medical aid as well. I mean, that's a really cool integration. But before I go down that rabbit hole, because that's going to distract me from this conversation, let's just get into where the business is at now as a company. Tell me about just to give me a sense of the scale, how you're operating. Yeah, where's the business at now?
Yeah, so currently we have 7 dark stores. Those dark stores are here in Johannesburg, mostly in Joburg North, Pretoria, and Centurion. And then with that dark store model, we have in the head office, we've got about 150 people who work in the head office. And then we have about 300 drivers who support this operation. These are independent drivers. And then what we also do on the other side, as part of that staff complement of 150, we've got a technical team that is still responsible for supporting Shoprite checkers on the 6060 platform. So that's our business overall.
So yeah, the audience might not know this, but now you're talking about the technical team that's supporting Shoprite Checkers 6060 app. There's some really cool information there, but I'll let you share that as kind of part of the founding story, because I know that's a little bit into the journey. But I guess just talk to me now about how you first started Zulzi as a company.
Yeah, so we started Zulzi in, I think it was in 2012, right? So 2012, that's when we started the business. It was an e-commerce platform where we were really targeting students, where students could sort of like order books online using our platform. I still remember very well when I left my job at F&B, where I used to work as a software developer, to go start Zulzi. I was very ambitious, thinking that within the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we would have made 3 million rand by selling books online, right? That didn't turn out to be the case. But I think that really helped me to sort of like learn a lot of things at that time. I think at that time, I think we used to compete with players like Take a Lot, Kalahari, who were very big at that time. But we decided to focus a lot on the student market. And I think we did a lot of things there to try and capture that market. And then we end up like also trying to sell like entry-level gadgets. And then that's where I think we started winning. And then the following year, and then we tried again for textbooks. But this time around, we wanted to sort of like offer quick deliveries to students, because the first time when we went in, we realized that a lot of students were not keen on buying books online because they were, like the bookshops were just around the corner. So they rather go to a bookshop and buy books for themselves. Also, the other players as well, it looks like they were also struggling. They take a lot in Kalahari. They were struggling to penetrate that market. It's at that time that I realized that maybe if we could offer like quick deliveries to students, it can change things completely for us, right? And immediately when we started to offer like 1 hour to 2 hour delivery, we started to see a lot of students becoming more and more interested in buying books online. So that to me really told me that the speed is quite critical for e-commerce. And that's when I actually started asking myself, what if we could do this for everything, right? It doesn't have to be books only. It could be, groceries, like fast food, pharmaceuticals, everything. And that's when I had the idea of actually pivoting from just selling books online to be like you call it like a super app that sort of like aggregate these different retailers came into mind, and that's when we started like building Zulzi as a platform where you can actually order different things from that platform, including groceries, pharmacy, and alcohol and the likes.
I mean, that's quite a journey to go on and quite a change. I mean, to start off from targeting students and with really it makes me think about when people talk about if you think you're in a niche, go lower. You went low. You went super niche to begin with in terms of what you were trying to get to students. But again, just to give a sense of the scale now, I mean, you spoke about it, but I'd like to get a visual, because just for the sake of the audience, I mean, there's a couple background noises going on there. And I'm pretty sure you're in one of your dark stores right now and in one of your warehouses. Do you have a window so we can quickly see what it is that's next to you and what this might look like?
Yeah, I do, actually. I do.
Can we have a quick look?
Try and twist my... Yeah, we can. I think let me see if I can. I can quickly just take my laptop and try and twist it from here. Uh, I'm not sure if you're able to see that. So I'm sitting in one of the dark stores in Paulsov, and that's how it looks like, right? So yeah, so this is how a dark store will look like, right? So all the grocery items. So we've got seven of these actually, like these dark stores where all your groceries, you find all your groceries, all the pharmaceutical products, all your alcohol within this dark store, right? So yeah, so this is how a typical dark store will look like.
So just keep the view there for a second, because just for the sake of the listeners that are only hearing this and not able to see this, is what I'm viewing here is an like open plan rectangular shaped factory, large, like pretty large scale, and there are these rows of shelves where each there's separate goods. Everything looks color coded. There's people going around. I think there was a forklift that I saw there. There's a packing area that's separate to the business. So there's a full operation. And Donald and me are looking at this from the second story. So there's a great view of the operation here. And I think this is a good visual representation of the scale and change that Zulzi has been through as a business. And especially now, and there's seven of these. So yeah, thank you for the glimpse into a bit of the reality, because obviously the problem with having a remote podcast is that we obviously just see faces, but in terms of your business, to get a sense of what it actually looks like is fantastic. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
right, so I want to get back into that point, because it's that starting point, because there's a lot of pivots and learning that you figured out. I actually want to go one step even further. That initial naivety that you had leaving F&B is like, you make 2 to 3 million rand in a couple of weeks, etc. And I think we can always have a bit of a laugh at ourselves thinking that, because every entrepreneur is going to resonate there. But just in your opinion, reflecting back, where do you think that that opinion or that naivety came from, and how quick that learning was? Like, why did you think it was going to be that easy or that quick to begin with?
Look, I mean, like, obviously, one of the things is like, you can easily go and study the market to say this market is this big, sitting there with a spreadsheet and thinking, what, if I capture 10% of this market, then I'm all good, right? And that's how a lot of people, like start, by having those assumptions. They always say everything on a spreadsheet always works, right? So even for me, everything looks so cool on a spreadsheet. But when it's time to do things on the ground, that's where you get to learn a lot of things, right? And I think even today, my principle is like you have to get on the ground, right? If you just sit there with a fancy spreadsheet, you will never know, right, what's going to work, right? And I think for me, when I went into the space, it was very clear that people were not interested in buying things online. In fact, the first week or two were really struggling. In fact, I was sitting there and I had managed to get relationships with publishers, and somehow they trusted me, and then they gave me all the books. And then now I'm sitting with those books there in my apartment in Four Ways. I had a 3-bedroom apartment there. And then, and then now it's like, now I have to figure a way in terms of like trying to flush all those books, right? And when the school opens, you don't have that much of you only have a 3 weeks window, right? To really sell as much as you can. First week is the busiest week, second week, third week is even like less busier. So for me, I had to actually find a way. One of the things I had to do was to really get into the universities, set up the stand. There was no time to ask for permission at that time, right? I didn't want anyone to say no. So it was a matter of like go into university, set up the stand. It was as informal as it can get. The most important thing there was to get the things done, right? To make as much as you can, right? And then the first day you realize that no one's interested in buying these books. You have to drop the price a little bit. In fact, going to a point where the only thing we could do was just to sell them at cost, right? So there was no money that was made, but I was sitting there. I had some cash, and at that time, I'm realizing that should I be going back to F&B and ask my boss to apologize to him, to say, I'm sorry, I'm back, or
I was
can I
wrong.
actually try something else, right? Yeah, I was wrong. So immediately, I think in my head, I was like, no, there has to be something else I can do, right? Because I'm sitting here, I've got like almost, I think I was sitting there with 300,000 rand in cash, no profit, right? So I was thinking like, maybe I can try something else, right? And then the next thing was to try entry-level gadgets. And again, there was no time to like I was actually literally doing everything, from, like creating posters, driving the stuff to deliver to people by yourself. So, like you had to do almost everything, to get things to work, you have to see it by yourself. And then I remember like I went as far as VAR, putting posters everywhere. And that's where a lot of students became interested. They came to VET when I was sitting there to say, what, where are the gadgets? Can we order them, And that's how I actually managed not to go back to work, right? And that's where my journey started of being an entrepreneur. Yeah.
And I'm just listening to that because also from a business model perspective, you got to begin with the end in mind, and you got to have something that's profitable or will be profitable at some point. Because like the whole point of a business is to essentially generate profits. Sorry, the whole point of a business is actually to add value to customers. Let me clarify that point, right? But I think you can't have a sustainable business if it is not profitable, because someone needs to fund this in terms of, in one way or another. The most sustainable form of funding always going to be your customers. But the point that you mentioned there in the first spot is that the first problem that you need to unlock is that, can this business generate cash? And you realize that this business can generate cash and pretty quickly and quite well. But the profit point is now that's a problem. We need to be able to figure out different goods or a different segment or a different model in order to generate the profit. But the cash hypothesis is ticked, and I think that's a great sign to begin with, because I think it's, again, a lot of people just underestimate the simplicity of that thought, and they've got like a great idea for an opportunity or a problem to solve within the market, but it's like, is this going to generate cash? And that's just something that's it's so simple, but often overlooked within the excitement and naivety of starting out, which is why I wanted to tap into that idea. So Donald, okay, so you pivoted into electronics. How did you get into groceries?
Yeah, so in fact, funny enough, before I even get into groceries, I also pivoted again to try and sell dresses, because like books were very seasonal. You're focusing on students. And then I remember in December, I was like, we have a platform, we're selling books, we're selling gadgets. Can we try and add dresses, right, into the platform? And the first thing I did was to sort of like look at partnering with one of the guys who used to make some very cool African dresses. And what was interesting there, I could see the demand was quite massive. Like, in fact, when I checked my Google Analytics, I could see that all over the world, people were searching for those dresses. They really wanted the dresses. And I could see that like this can actually become like a very big business. And the guys at the time who were making those dresses, they were struggling to produce dresses for themselves, for the working customers, right? So it was at the time where the African print just, was just like, it just took the world by storm. Like every person just wanted to wear an African print. If they're going to a wedding or going wherever, they just wanted those dresses. So yeah, so the guys really struggled to give me stock, right? And people were really, that was the first thing where I saw like the power of internet, where I could see that, wow, people really want these things. I don't have to advertise it that much. Like to give you an idea, for instance, like on the book stuff, when I looked at it every day, you'll have like on your online store, you just have 250 to 500 people browsing through your store, right? But with dresses now, sitting at 10,000 people, right, who are actually browsing this thing, and they want the product, and most of the things are out of stock because these guys can't give me the dresses. And then the first thing that I had to do was to assemble a team to say, no, let me try and make these dresses by myself, right? Bought the machines, we started sewing in the apartment in 4 ways. And then I still remember now it was time to sort of do mass production, right? And orders are coming left, right, and center. And I still remember like the lady who was producing the dresses for me, she got a lot of sizes wrong, right? So when you order medium, you get large. So the returns killed me. So we sold as much in December, but before you know it, like there was a lot of returns. And I realized that no, this game is gonna be too complicated for me, right? I'm not ready for this. Then I parked that part.
Yeah,
But
apparel's
there was
a
a lot
different
of
story,
lessons
man.
as well
Yeah.
learned. Yeah, but there was a lot of lessons, a lot of lessons. And then fast forward then.
Sorry, before you continue, let's actually. Yeah. That's the first point that I want to maybe double click on. Like every time I have someone on the show, they're like, "Oh, lots of lessons learned," and then they move on. I was like, "Okay, what were those lessons that you learned?"
Yeah, look, I think sometimes you just have to understand what you're getting yourself into, right? So it's easy for one to, like for instance, like when now I was actually getting myself into manufacturing dresses, right? You have a technology platform, okay, great, right? But you really want to start manufacturing dresses, and that's a different ballgame altogether, right? And often sometimes you can find yourself with having this small thing, oh, I've got this platform, and then you're like, okay, cool, this platform can do literally anything, right? But that's not always the case, and most of the time, you find that maybe you just don't have enough understanding, or or maybe you could be taking a lot of things for granted, right? So at that time, I think I got to learn that dresses were just a different ball game altogether, right? Even from the platform perspective as well, there was a lot of things that we had to get right, choosing a size and all that effort was just way too much, right? So the idea of saying, because I've got an e-commerce platform that can sell goods, I can therefore just easily add dresses into it. There was a lot of things that were needed to support that, So you have to be very much aware of what you're putting yourself into, before you can just say, I can just do all of these things. And that's why maybe also like creating like these super apps can be very, very tricky in that, because a lot of people, when they create these things, they don't actually understand what they're getting themselves into, right? So I think, like before you actually pivot more, you really need to make sure that you've gotten that one thing right. And you also have to ask yourself, is it better to have a super app or super brand as well? And that, needs to be answered properly as well, because I haven't seen a lot of super apps as well in South Africa do so well, right? But super brands, I've seen them excel a lot.
Thank you for sharing that. And this reinforces why, like all of our clients, when we start off with the first workshop around market segmentation, we start around defining not just your industry, but what industries you operate in, but what the main functions of that are. And the point there is that if you speak about e-commerce as an industry, it's like partially true, but the point of e-commerce is actually just a customer interface plus logistics. But the point is, are you in apparel? Are you in grocery retail? Are you in electronic goods? Because those have got very different customer buying behaviors. They've got very different return policies. They've got very different supply chains in themselves. So although you can think e-commerce as this platform, the supply chain is fundamentally different depending on the goods that you're selling there. And the point that you're thinking through is actually not like, it's maybe that shift around the fact is like, I'm an e-commerce company. Is like, actually, no, I'm now an apparel manufacturing company that just happens to have an e-commerce platform, right? And so, and I think that's the shift when we think about our business from the inside out in terms of what we have. We can often go around into building a business that we actually don't necessarily even want and don't even necessarily want to scale, instead of going from the outside and who's the market and then building the business for that, but then using our capabilities for that accordingly. So yeah, that's just my reflection on that. And it's like that's part of my I guess helicopter level view of what your lessons were at that time. Okay, so you went through dresses and you went through manufacturing those. I mean, I love this again because this is such pure entrepreneurial spirit and story of going from pivot to pivot to pivot. Like, what's going to work? Let's do this. Where's the demand? This is more complex than I thought it was. Let's change direction. Let's figure this out. So like, it's really it's part of it, and I'm loving that part of the story. So dresses. Now again, the question was, how did you get into groceries?
So yeah, so after that, obviously, like now there's this lessons of like every time we deliver things to students, when we deliver quickly, we can see that people are interested in that, right? So at that time, I think it was 2016. The only platforms that were really online was your Pick and Pay, Woolworth online. They would deliver things to you like in 3 days. So to me, like I could see that opportunity there, that definitely groceries, there is something that one can do, right? And the same thing for food as well, right? Like if you look at the food, if you want to order things from your Mr. D at the time, you had to call. There's not enough transparency. You can't really do a lot of things by yourself, right? So for me, like I really started to see this new opportunity that was there, like in terms of like just creating a platform that could sort of like fulfill all those needs from pharmacy, groceries, fast food. And at that time as well, I had a little bit of experience because now I also saw like how hard it was to fight with the big guys, right? So after, like I was trying to fight with Kalahari, take a lot through books, I could see already that, fighting those guys can really be hard, because the guys will just come with a big truck, market to students. So at that time, I think I had a little bit of an experience that in terms of like, maybe the right thing to do here is to actually pick something where you don't have like massive competition and try and execute on that, right? And that's where the idea of like selling groceries online, but doing it differently as well in terms of speed, came about,
Yeah, and so okay, so that was the basis from the get-go. So that was the gap in the market, is that the demand wasn't just for delivery, it was for speed of delivery, and no one was being able to fulfill that. Okay, so talk to me about now. So that's essentially how that point started. What did that business now have to become? Because again, in terms of the capabilities that you have around obviously logistics, but also picking and packing and I was going to say logistics twice, but but before I keep rambling, like what was it that you had to build out now as a business in order for this business model to now function?
Yeah. Look, at that time, let me say at that time, like when you're building these things, you could see that number one is you're going to require a lot of tech to do this, right? In fact, like just selling groceries in itself or selling fast food, you need a lot of tech, right? So the first thing I did there was to call Mike. Michael, I used to work with him at FNB. And I was like, Michael, and I had a little bit of cash as well at the time, right? So what I then did is like, I said, you must come and work with me. Let's build this thing together. And I still remember that time I was like, yeah, I've got 100,000 rand for you. You're going to get this every month. Let's do this together, right? And then he came. That 100,000 rand, I think he only got paid for 1 month. But after that, he was also converted, So he was really passionate as well, right? So yeah, we were like building this thing. And then before you know it, my cousin as well, Dash, came to join us as well. But we are building these things. It's all about passion now, right? And in fact, at that time, I remember all the cash that I was making through books, it was actually just going into this thing, right? So you're funding these things, the office, everything. It's coming from those small cash that you're getting by selling books online, right? So here we're building these things, and we had no idea as well in terms of what would it take for us to get to a point where this thing is profitable. We had no idea about this thing of fundraising, that we must go and actually fundraise to get this thing to work, right? We thought we could get it all the way, without having to fundraise, just building, get scale, and then from there you can really build a profitable business, right? But as we're doing that, and then the likes of Uber Eats launched, Master D as well really converted their business. They started to take their food delivery business more serious, and then they were building apps, and also like really going out there with a very strong team to acquire a restaurant, to partner with them. And at that time, from our side, we didn't even have a partner, right? So we're this platform, we've built it, it's now live, but there's no partnership, right? There was no partners. So we went there without any partners. So, the retailers that we were using at the time were Pick and Pay, who were at Discount Clicks, we had to scrap them as well. So we went there, crawl, get all the products, put them in our platform, right? So we used to even have different jobs that goes there. If the price changes, we go there and update it, So there was really a lot of things that we had to do to build
and all
that
very
platform,
manual,
right? Yeah. Also, like at the time, then we had to get to a point where we can automate some of these things, right? So automating how you can get like new price data. If the website changes on the other side, you must get all that info and put it on your platform, right? So there was a lot of things that I think we're building. I think for me, in fact, I'll call them tech capabilities that we're building, where you are just looking at solving this problem that you have in front of you, and then you end up building these amazing tech capabilities, in-house, right? By trying to solve all those different problems that we're challenged with, So I still remember, for instance, even one of the problems we had was when the shoppers go to the stores, most of the things are out of stock, right? And how do you deal with it, right? And then the first thing that I thought of was like, okay, maybe we can really build a live chat, where you can actually suggest something to the customer in real time, and then they can tell you if they like it or not. So those capabilities really helped us, right, to really scale to get to where we were at the time. But one thing that was also interesting at the time, because remember we had food and groceries, right? So when your Uber Eats Mr. D launched, I could see that like the food space is getting hot. There's now it reminded me of like your Take a Lot Kalahari, where those guys had more cash than us. Now you've got some serious competition. and I don't have any money. I still remember Uber Eats will be like, in Bram, they'll be giving everyone like free burgers. I tried to eat as much as I could to take them down, but I realized, no, this is a different scale altogether. So it got me thinking as well, right, in terms of like, do I really want to go and compete in this space, right? The food delivery space. As much as like, I think after 6 months, we're doing like a GMV of about 1 million rand a month, right? And the 900,000 rand was coming from fast food. But the reality is, I could see that like these big guys are really going to walk all over us, and I didn't want to go back and have the same challenges that I had back then. So then I was like, what, maybe the best thing for us is to really try and focus on groceries, right? So let's leave everything else. Let's focus on groceries. So we're gonna leave 900,000 rand to focus on the 100,000 rand, right? It was kind of like a scary decision at the time when I took it, right? Like, okay, and when I zoom into that 100,000, in fact, it was actually one customer who was driving 95% of that. So they were buying a lot of Woolworth stuff. And I was thinking, oh my God, like where do you? Because I've never even imagined that there's a person who could buy groceries for about 900,000 rand a month. And I still remember that time I was thinking, damn, if I get like even 50 of these customers, this will be fine you know. So then we started building, and then that customer obviously, like when she orders stuff, I'll go there, speak to her in the house. She'll tell me that, oh, you're missing this category from Woolies, you didn't scrap this, you didn't get this, and then we started improving the platform, right? And yeah, and then before you know it, I think a lot of people started using us, and then we started growing. And then everybody was just raving about the service that these guys actually they are doing it better than all the retailers, right? So yeah, we started getting more traction on the grocery space. And then I think to me that was the beginning of our journey in the grocery space.
Yeah. So, I want to go back into something that you seem to do naturally and intuitively. And so just for context, Metavolve, we've got two different client profiles. One is they're dealing with the chaos of scaling, and they need a clear strategy that their team can actually take and understand and execute so that they can be freed up to actually focus on growth whilst the business is grown by the team. The second one is a little more straightforward, just the growth is plateaued. And right, we need to unlock new opportunities for growth and strategies for that. And the way that we go back is often just understanding, unpacking what does the market look like, what are the customer needs, what is the competitive landscape. Now, the reason why I give that as context is specifically within that is the insights that are just unlocked by that process, and thinking about who are our competitors, like where is the value of what it is that we're doing, where's the niche, what changes have happened in the market that are affecting our ability to grow and our market share. That kind of happens through the process, but you have been thinking like that from day one. So the examples that you gave around, even though the market is pulling you in the direction of 900K is coming from fast food, you're looking at Mr. D and Uber Eats as potential competitors, where a lot of people would be like, well, clearly I can compete with them. The customers are pulling from me. But you had this wisdom and moment to have a look and be like it might feel good now, but compared to where we're going, this is not the right route to play. So I can obviously explain this through strategy and my knowledge of strategy, but I always, the whole point of this podcast is I want to make things practical. So practically, besides your intuition, what are the things that you did, or the behaviors or habits that you've formed to constantly keep aware and abreast of what's happening in the market, what's happening with competitors, what's happening with customers? What did you practically do to make sure that you never took your finger off that pulse?
Yeah, maybe let me start here. I think if I roll back a little bit, when I came up with this idea of selling groceries, fast food, super app in one thing, right? Initially, I thought, I'm actually the only guy who had thought about these things, right, in the entire universe, right? And I felt special at that time to say, wow, I'm so smart. I came up with this idea, right? But before you know it, like I soon realized that there's actually many other people out there who are trying to do the same thing, you know. And there were many examples, and also you could see where also the shift was going, right? So, for instance, at that time, I started like picking up. There were guys like Postmates in the US, DoorDash. There were guys like Drovo in Spain. So there were just so many players who were coming into the space, right? So to me, then it became clear that actually, in the e-commerce space, in fact, if you want to operate in the e-commerce space, you cannot operate just by, in fact, I'll say not just e-commerce, technology space, you have to actually understand what's happening around you, right? It's not just about you only, right? So a lot of players make a mistake of thinking about like, what am I doing? And not think about like, what else is going on around me, right? And that can change in terms of the business models are changing every day. There's just so many moving blocks, right? So for instance, like, there are people who are working on smartphones to better them, to improve smartphones, right? There are people who are working on data, right? There are people who are, so those things can actually have an impact on your business model, right? So one day you could be sitting here and you think people actually want to look at text, how they buy things, or they want to look at images, how they buy things. And then you might find that actually people prefer videos. But because of how expensive data is, people don't want to watch videos just like that. But when it becomes cheaper, you might find that your model changes completely. Like you can get wiped out if you don't actually check that. So you can actually die not because of you have actually failed to implement or to execute on what you're currently working on now, right? You can fail because something radical has changed outside of your control. And that's why even today, like I think one of the things that you have to really make sure that you don't actually find yourself left behind is actually checking all those things to say, am I still actually executing on the right things, right? Is there anything that I can check out there? Are there startups in India or China that are doing something crazy or something cool that can really apply in our market as well, right? So I think you need to have that community that keeps you in check as well, right? And that community, it means you have to look all over the world, right? And also there's a risk of like, if a lot of these startups as well will get things to work in the US, they will definitely come to South Africa as well, right? So if you're sitting here, the only thing you're looking at is like all these big guys like Take a Lot, ShopRite, then you can actually lose out the battle because someone can actually come from nowhere and say, you know what, here's a new product, So for me, I learned that at that time that actually it's so critical for us in this space to actually check who else is doing this, all right? And from that time also, I got to learn that actually it's not ideas don't. Everybody's got an idea, right? But execution is everything, right? A lot of people can see it and think of different things, very innovative, whatever the case is. But I think the most important thing is, can you execute on it, right? And I quickly learned that at that time. And in fact, if I were to also reflect back on some of the things that we changed, right? So for instance, like when we pivoted from like just leaving the restaurant space to say we're going to focus on the food space, when I look back now, in fact, even at that time with that heavy competition, if we had understood that we can execute better, could have still won, right? And I think the same thing happened in the US as well. Players like DoorDash, like DoorDash, in fact, when Uber Eats launched that site, they actually decided to go to the markets where they were not there, right? And before you know it, they are now the biggest player, right? So I think execution in everything is the most important thing. Can you execute, right? Obviously, when you've got big players, deep pockets, it means even your execution needs to get better, right? You cannot sit and make mistakes. You have to make sure that you are moving faster than them. You are doing things better than everyone. So I think for me, like, that's one of the things that I learned then. So obviously from our side, let me say when we started Zulzi, I also didn't have that confidence. I was just like a young boy, was focusing on students, all of those things. But I think now what I've learned is like, you can actually go in a space where there's competition and do things differently and still win.
And look, I think also what's implicit in what you're describing is that you had ambition to begin with. So you weren't doing this as a lifestyle business, right? Or have a family business. Because if you're doing that as like, you don't even necessarily think major competition. You like thinking the community that you play in, because the size of your ambition is the scale of what your competitive landscape looks like. And so you clearly have the ambition to operate on a global market and scale to that point. For you, it's just like it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. But the point, if that's the end that I have in mind, is like, this is what I need to be looking at. And the other point there that I've been so guilty of doing myself is it's a problem with naturally being quite innovative, is that you go and you try to figure out problems yourself, but then you realize you waste so much time in the learning journey of figuring that out because there's other people that have solved this long ago. And you can just go and have a look at what they've done. And they might not be in South Africa, but like the amount of time that you waste trying to learn the lessons yourself for the record, this is exactly why I also do the podcast. Like the number of people making mistakes and scaling journeys and going through this part of the business that's so hectic and risky. The way that I say it is, but there's the two greatest moments of risk in an entrepreneur's life are when they choose to start the business and when they choose to scale their business. So yeah, thank you for sharing. And it's good to get a sense in terms of how your thinking has operated and evolved over time. So Donald, now we've got a sense of how the business is working. I mean, like you've implemented a lot of tech. You've got these processes. You've got people that are picking and packing from multiple stores. This is how it's gone accordingly. You've got price plugins, and you've automated the sense that the pricing is the same. You're committing to rapid delivery as fast as you possibly can, which means that obviously you're very localized in terms of your geographical scope to be able to execute on that. But now the point of when was it that you first started growing? Because what I want to understand is like when we talk about these scaling issues, the first thing for me is when you scale very quickly, maintaining like quality and customer satisfaction and customer experience can be a serious challenge. So like what was the first like growth point that you experienced that you would say put your quality, delivery time, and customer satisfaction to the test?
Yeah. I think maybe even before we get to the scaling part, because I think for us, let me say, when we started doing groceries, it was very challenging as well because there was no relationship. So what will happen is like you, as a customer, you go into our app, you buy groceries, and then behind the scenes, we need to load someone with cash. They go into the store, they buy groceries, and we need to have cash for that, right? So in fact, we started experiencing a lot of challenges back then because cash flow became a real problem, right? So moving from 100,000 to 200,000 was challenging. And often that will happen when someone is actually shopping. So you find that like a day is maybe we budget like 100,000 rand, and then the following day is 200,000 rand. But we have not closed the store, right? So all the pickers are in the store, and then now here's an order for 200,000 rand. And what I had to do, I'll be sitting on the phone calling all these people, my friends, trying to get that cash, right? At times, like now you need to go and run and someone deposit money and then you need to take it and deposit like physical cash so the guys can actually buy the things, you know. And sometimes, you'll see the guys posting the picker saying, you know what, the card is declining, you know. But it wasn't declining. For them, they were thinking it's declining because maybe they haven't transferred money into the card. But for my side, it was declining because there was no money, you know.
There's no money.
But the people who were working there, there's no money. But people who were working there, they were thinking like, no, like also like you have to, people need to understand that they work for a good company. You know, they can't be thinking this company is broke, you know. So there was a lot of that, right? So we were struggling a lot. I still remember like, we got to a point where even we could not pay rent for like a good 6-8 months, you know. And at that time, I would get interviews, like you, or 702. And I was hoping that, when you go to this radio interview, you're hoping that it's going to change things for good, you know. You go check the app, there isn't that much sales happening, you know. But then the only person who will listen to your interview is the landlord. I still remember this other time after the interview, when I went back to the office, the landlord is sitting on the boardroom, and is waiting for me, and when I got there, he was like, "Yo, I saw you on the interview, right? That means you're doing so well. When
Sounds
I
like things are going quite great for you,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I had to tell him that, whatever you saw on the news was not meant for you, right? I can't go on the news and tell customers how we're struggling. I have to keep a positive spirit, positive face. So the truth is we don't have money, but we'll pay you when we get there, And that's the thing that really kept us going, right? So like really just one of the things that I learned in those days was like, when you have a problem, speak to people, tell them, right? So telling people that you've got a financial problem can give you that, because we literally were funded by that as well, right? Where a landlord says, you know what, it's fine. You can keep going here, right? I trust you that whenever you get that money, you'll pay us. You look like you're a trustworthy person, the same thing with the friends around me.
Because you didn't have a business model problem, and it wasn't your strategy that was an issue either. It was just a working capital issue, which is, I guess, the nature of the business model that you operate. But it's one of those things where it's like you can't, like the foreseeable future is not so foreseeable, as I like to say. So the point there is like having that kind of cash reserves to unlock that is like that's not something that you have available to you. So it's, and I think something like that makes it a lot easier to be able to ask for help, because I have no doubt in the business. It's just like it needs resources.
Yeah, no, definitely. Look, I mean, we needed resources, but also at the same time, I think there was also a lot of things that we're banking on, right? We're banking on like the whole model to work. We needed like partnerships from retailers, right? So we can get better margin as well. So it's not like we must start. So that when the people see that this is working, they can then partner with you and get some margin as well, right? So there was a lot of faith in that to say, as we execute these things, one of those big retailers will come and say, you know what, I want to partner with you, right? So those were the things that we were dealing with, but we have to keep this thing going as well, right? So I think, but obviously what's also important as well is you don't want to invest time and money in things that are not going anywhere, right? So what was also clear to us is like, that was going to be the space, the next hot space, and we have to find ourselves in it, and I don't think we're wrong, so we were right. So all that investment that we put through, I think, I would say did, pay off.
So again, on that point is you're scaling quite quickly. I want to separate the cash flow problem and talk about the funding needed to be able to scale that, because that would have unlocked it as well. And there's a different sub story there that I'm just going to park for a sec. But I still really want to go to a point there's even there. So you're going from 100,000 to 200,000 a day. Obviously, the cash flow pressure is a big one because, like, quite literally, you can't deliver because you can't purchase. So how is it that, like, in terms of, I still want to go back to this point of maintaining the quality, the customer experience, delivery time, maintaining the value proposition, the promise that you're doing there. There's the point of the cash and just not being able to necessarily execute just because of the cash. But what other challenges that did you face as your demand was growing to try and keep up with satisfying all of the stakeholders that are on your platform?
Yeah, and I think, look, I mean, what was key then, even then, when we had these challenges of cash, we managed to deliver all these orders, right? So we're still trying to push for that 1 hour delivery.
That's awesome.
So that 1 hour delivery was still happening no matter what. So that means if you are busy shopping, I'm on the call, calling people, I'm getting money, I'm driving like a mad chicken, going to the ATM to put the cash, right? So that you get your groceries in 1 hour, right? There was just a lot happening in the background that, like as a customer, you would not even have imagined, And then what happened is after that, then I think our really like turning point happened when some lady actually posted about us on Facebook, right? She posted, it was a closed group, I think 5,000 moms. It's called Jewish Jobbik moms, very wealthy, like Jewish people in that group. Someone posted about us to say, these Zulzi guys are so good, right? I use them. They're so quick. They deliver things quickly. And then, other people then started commenting the same thing to say, I use them all the time. I don't use the traditional retailers anymore to buy my groceries. I use these guys to order stuff from, and then it was at the back of that where we saw a huge spike on the business. I remember when I woke up the following day, we were used to doing like, let's say 100 orders a day, right? I woke up in the morning the following day, there was about 700 orders waiting for me to deal with it,
Sure.
And I still remember when I Googled, I was checking, is there anyone who wrote an article about us? What happened here? And now I'm sitting here, I have a problem of I don't have shoppers, I don't have drivers, I don't have money to do all of these things, right? So now I need to wake up and fix that problem, right?
So before you continue, I also just want to like double click on the point there is that what those nothing can ever replace word of mouth and social proof as in terms of marketing. You can spend all you want in terms of marketing. You can do all the PR activities. You can get on 7202. You can get on the founder files. Don't get me wrong. It works and it helps. But that point around like people that I already trust saying, hey, we use this and it's great. Nothing is going to unlock more customers than that, ever. Let's pause here for a moment. If you've made it this far into the episode, it's probably because we're talking about things that you're trying to implement in your business. You found your sweet spot in the market, you've gained momentum, and you've already been through a phase of growth. Because of this, you know that on the outside, growth is super sexy. But on the inside, it's incredibly difficult to achieve and to sustain. So now I've got a question for you. Now that you know the sacrifices it takes to achieve growth, how much time are you currently spending thinking about your direction and your next phase of growth? I bet not as much as you'd like, because you're still in the thick of it. Leading, deciding, pushing for performance, pursuing new opportunities, maybe even thinking about selling the business. See, your story is yours. But this chapter where growth meets complexity, this is when things get hard. Because you can listen to insights from podcasts and stories from people that have been there before, but applying it to your context is a completely different ballgame. So let me help you. If you want to have a 90-minute, no strings attached conversation with me, then head over to Metavolve's website in the description of this podcast below, and let me help you navigate this next phase of growth. Because at the end of the day, building a great business is complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated.
No, definitely. And I think for us, there were a lot of people as well validating. You see, because also and that's what is today when you look at social media, people can be paid to go and say positive things. That's why even the social media now needs you to say it, to say, I've been paid to do this. But when something is organic and people can actually say, we actually know this thing, right? Nothing beats that. And that you only get by just being consistent, right? So, if you think about
100%.
it, that customer had been ordering from us for quite some time. But because we're so consistent in offering her great service, and even her friends as well, they were getting that consistent service. Then it came out, it blew up, right? And at that time, to be honest, we were not ready as well, right, for it. So I still remember when I woke up that day, I was like, damn, we need to quickly get a solution. So the first solution I came up with was like, how do we get, it was Taxify at the time, and now called Bolt, right? So I had a partnership with Taxify to say, help us to deliver these things, right? So they immediately agreed to me to say, we're going to do it. So we're requesting like manually though, right? So you request Taxify to go and pick up the groceries and then deliver to the customer, right? And then the other thing is obviously getting cash. Cash was just running out, and now I'm like literally like calling all my friends trying to raise that cash. I think to give you an idea, I think on that day, I think it was a Monday, I probably had like about 150,000 Rand in the bank, and what was needed is like 500,000 Rand more, right, to actually buy those groceries, and that's what I was able to raise on that day. Sometimes you never know what you're capable of doing until you're under pressure. And I also had to do that while I'm also shopping as well, right? So you have to also have to shop. And then we delivered, a lot of those orders were delivered, right? But what was interesting as well is as we're doing that as well, it also came with a lot of complaints as well, right? Because, our drivers or whoever we had, they, as driver partners, they used to offer like great service. I was one of the drivers as well, so myself included. So you go there, you order, you're getting a great service, right, from our drivers. Now we have a third party that is not, they don't know anything about groceries, right? So in fact, there were even at some case, I remember some cases where they were actually debating with customers, right? So one of the driver called the customer is like, I'm on the 7th floor, and the driver's like, hell no, I'm not coming to the 7th floor, right? You better come down here to collect your stuff,
Yeah, I'm a taxi driver. I'm not a grocery delivery guy.
Exactly. And at that time, in fact, I started to realize that one of the things that you can take for granted is, these big businesses where you think there was so much advantage, right, is like where you think of, this company's got all the logistics that you can think of in the world, right? They can just do these things instantly, right? I realized that was not the case. And that was the thing that I was afraid of when Uber launched at the time. A lot of people were saying like, because they already have this logistics network, right? They're just going to walk all over everybody, right? But then at that moment, I realized that actually, they actually don't have that advantage that everybody is thinking of. They're going to have to go and rebuild these capabilities from scratch, And I think for me, that's the advantage when you're a startup. You have to look at those things in terms of like, what's the advantage that you can have as a startup? And I think for me, the advantage that you can have as a startup is actually waking up today and doing something, right? Where there's no dilution of what's working and what's not working. That's the advantage that we have as a startup. And I think at that time, we soon realized that actually delivering things this way is not how we want to do things, So how do we quickly in fact, what we had to start doing as well at the time lot of those bold drivers or taxify drivers actually started saying, you know what, we want to work for you guys. And we want to train them on how to deliver things for customers, you know. So most of them, in fact, end up joining Zulzi to deliver for us, right? But also there was a huge learning for me in terms of like, you know, like you should not always be afraid of these big companies with money, right? You have something special if you can execute, if you can wake up today and really work on this problem and you make sure that you're solving it and you're moving it as fast as you can.
And I want to speak this as well towards what we call horizontal integration, but this is essentially scaling up your business faster than you could do organically yourself, and usually through mergers, acquisitions, partnerships, alliances. But the point there is that same thing that you mentioned with Uber Eats is scale can unlock and allow for opportunity and the ability to do something, right, with resources. But the problem is money can't buy you customer experience. The only thing that's going to get you a consistent customer experience is the knowledge, the understanding, the training, and the empathy and the attitude of the people that are directly facing the customer. And the main way to do that well is to role model it yourself. To show the people on the ground exactly what customer experience I want to give them, why it's super important, show them how it's done, and then also to build that into your management team and your leadership team to show how important that is as well. And no kind of scale and resources can do that. So to your point, I think, and I love the way that you mentioned that, is that, you know, I think definitely be aware and wary of your larger competitors. But the great thing about being small and being niche is that they're not going to be able to beat you on the customer experience. As long as it's your focus, is your customer experience and delivering an amazing customer experience, they're not going to be able to beat you on that. Yeah. And it means a slightly slower scaling in terms of what's possible, but it's far more sustainable and robust. And the same thing applies to when you're partnering with other businesses now, is because for them, they don't know, but they also don't care about your customer experience as much as you do. So although you can now partner, and like exactly what you mentioned now with Taxify, is you unlock this just to be able to fulfill demand. But because I can't deliver on that customer experience, suddenly your customer churn and retention just goes through the floor. Because you might be able to deliver, but that consistency to stay there, and you have that spike, and now you've got another problem to solve. So I think the main point, as you said now as well, is scale, and essentially the ability, the resources to scale isn't everything. It's about can the customer experience be consistent as you scale, which is the hardest part of scaling, at least on the customer end.
No, definitely. And I think a lot of people sometimes, you wish for scale, right? You want to get scale, but there are a lot of people who are not ready for scale, right? Where you just have to work on the product, right? You just have to like go back in a back room, work on one thing, right? It's one single customer. And remember, like also like when you've got multiple customers, many people, many layers, right? It's so difficult to understand what the problem is, right? Because you've got so many layers, right? So there's a lot of people, you're a CEO for this big organization, but you have never spoken to a customer, right? Your customer service manager is not capturing the right thing as to like why are customers complaining. By the time it gets to you, you are actually working on the wrong thing, you know? And I think that's why for me it's so important for you to, even as the business scale, you still need to find ways of how do I go down, right? To check what's going on down there, right? That is actually absolutely
and how do you do
very,
that?
very critical, right? So for me, like so for some days I sit on customer service. Yeah, I sit on customer service. The days where I'll, go deliver something, like if there's something that I feel like I've got no idea of what's going on with it, I'll go down to it, right? And the other thing that's also important as well is to also understand what got you here, right? So for instance, I think one thing I've also learned is there's a lot of books out there that talks about, like, let's say companies that are led by, let's say, a manager or CEO that get hired to run a business, right? But there's not enough book that speaks about like founder-led companies, right? As to like how do you run your own company, right? And that's one thing that has been missing out there. And I think one of the things that I've like even I myself made a mistake of was to at some point you get to a point where you can see that you're frustrated, you're not getting to where you want to get to, right? And one of the things that I made a mistake of in the previous years, for instance, was to hire different people to come and deal with the product. To say this is how you build a product, right? And then they take over that, and then you've got all this fancy UX, UI designers, but you can see that the product is not moving as fast as we want it to. And they will tell you, like, look, I mean, to do UI, UX for this thing is going to take us 6 months, you know? And you're asking yourself, what are the developers going to be doing when you are still doing that design, you know? And those are the things that I learned that, you know, the critical stuff, right? Like in your company, right? You have to make sure that you can control it, right? And this applies to a lot of companies. Like even if you look at like all these founders, whether it's Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, you will soon realize that actually when there's a critical path, they don't want to let that out of sight. You know, you have to control it all the way, right? So it goes against what they will teach you about, like this the structure as a CEO. You've got these reports, people will report to you, and then you've got no way of going down as well, right? Because remember, like if someone reports to you now, it creates this boundary that like if you're gonna go down, you know, like now it means you are. What does it mean to this person, right? And I think for me, like what's critical and what we are seeing, maybe people don't, maybe sometimes you don't understand it very well. So like, what does it mean, right? So having more people, is it that some people, for instance, like if you look at like guys like Jason from Nvidia, for instance, who says he's got multiple reports, maybe over 50 people that reports to him, right? It's the same thing of trying to deal with like how do you get down for founder-led company, right? So how do you get down to the things that matters for you? And you know, you're probably the only person who knows how you build a company to get to where it's at, right? And that's why you should not be apologetic about like how do you want to do things even going forward? How do you want to run these things? How do you want to scale it going forward? You know, and I think when there's that confusion as well, which I think a lot of companies go through that. I also went through that where there was confusion about like who should be looking after the product, who should we be listening to, right? You just see things being stagnant, right? But the moment that is clear in terms of like this is what I want to build and this is how I want to build it, right? Then you start to move faster, right? And that's why I think for me, like, you know, like there's still a lot that seems to be unpacked in terms of like how should a founder-led company look like? How should it operate, right? And most of the time I'll say, you know, if you've got a founder-led company, it's so important for that founder to be able to get down to any stage, but also the people who support it must not feel like if now the CEO was talking to someone, was in customer service, the guy should not feel like they just don't know what they're doing, right? Or they're not good enough. So it's so important as well as you as a founder to actually make sure that your team understand that there will be days where I have to go and understand by myself. You know, there will be days where I have to go to the warehouse and pick by myself so I can correctly understand what the problem is, you know. So those things are super critical. So I mean, I still remember, I'll give you an example as well. When we're picking from the stores, there will be times where shoppers will make a lot of mistakes, right? Where, you know, like they pick a wrong thing. And then a lot of people will say, no, these shoppers are just not good. Let's fire them, you know? Then you start firing, but you realize actually they're making the same, like we're firing too many people now, you know? But then when you go down by yourself, you realize actually this thing is confused. Even myself, if I were to do it, I would be confused as to like which one should I pick, you know, fat free, full cream milk, right? Then you realize actually maybe it's a technology problem, right? Because a lot of people also don't see that, right? They see, you know, like if you have this problem and all you see is like, oh, for me, or what you have is a spoon, you think like the only way to solve this problem is by using the spoon. But there are times where you need a knife, you know. So for me, I think founder-led companies need a lot of that. And I think the moment the founder forgets that, right, where you forget to go down, to check how things are going, that's where you actually destroy the business, right? So staying true to that critical path, and not forgetting what got to where you are, you know, because also like, you know, this business also come with some legacy, right? There will be things that you find that there are standard out there, right? So to give an example, for instance, like at Zulzi, guys build software, it works. They don't do unit testing, but unit testing is a great thing. You should have it, right? There are people who write books about it, but because you on the other side have this thing of like, it's a legacy on you, right? And that's how you build this thing to get where it's at. So the problem now is if you're going to expect someone to come and do that, it becomes such a challenging thing and it can actually take a business in a wrong direction as well, right? So I mean, like for me, like for instance, like even the design stuff, I used to design things for Zulzi, right? Like the app, everything. And then maybe for the past 2 years, I was like, no, now I'm the CEO, I don't do that anymore, right? But then the product was just not evolving, stay there. And then now I had to come back. Last year I was like, you know what, I'm coming back. I'm gonna look at this app. We had to read like the new app that we have now. I had to like like make sure that I'm leading it. I'll call myself now a chief product officer. I'm the one who's actually checking everything. Any designer who's going to be helping me is like, I have to be the one who's saying, you know what, this should be here, this should be like that, this should be done like that. And that is because of the history that we had even before, right? So imagine now if you say you're going to change it instantly, all right? And that's where you're going to be making a mistake, right? So for instance, because I used to interview customers, talk to them, ask them what works, what doesn't work, uh, what's happening here, right? And then you find that whoever that you bring in, they can't even talk to a customer. So now they start doing things that are wrong automatically because this company has got a tradition of speaking to customers, speaking to everyone to get the feedback and interpret it the right way as well, right? Because you can also do those things. You can speak to customers but interpret it incorrectly, you know? So you need a guy who's actually going to say, I understand what they mean by this. I understand when they say this is incorrect, So there's always those things that I think needs to be put into context in terms of, like when you look at the founder-led company and versus a company that is probably like led by management or whatever the case is. So you need to really look at that very careful as well, right? So to me, like I'll say, like this is one of the things that really opened my eyes, that allowed us to put us back on track, for scaling again.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that in detail because it's what you're highlighting for me is something that's so necessary in terms of maintaining the entrepreneur and the entrepreneurial spirit in a business. This is why, like, the number of founders that I see, they get to product market fit, exit, go start something new, and I was like, guys, it's downhill from here. You've solved the hardest part of the journey, and the point is like keeping your spirit in, and no one understands the business better than you. But the everything you're describing is so necessary, but it's such a difficult balancing act because how do you do that but without falling into the founder's trap where now the business is totally dependent on you and your knowledge? So I definitely want to unpack that. But from our side, the way we do this is that this is where we take the management and leadership team on this strategy journey. Because the point there is like when we look at unpacking the market, we unpack the competitive landscape. What are your competitive advantages? What are your strengths? How is it you want to grow? What customer experience do you want? That's before we even think what's the long term and how you want to get there. That information builds into the understanding because the one of the biggest problems that we see is that it's not because the same thing as you talk about the pickers, same thing with managers and leaders. It's not the fact that they're incapable. It's the fact that they don't understand what it is about your customers, what their needs are, what their problems are, why they use your product a specific way, why you built this product in that way, why your feature roadmap is that. They don't have the why. They don't have the so what and understanding from your customer's perspective. So to be able to build that into their journey and understanding is the point where, for me, solves that issue of founder's trap where I can have the freedom to go around the business and get in there and understand what's going on and be able to solve the problems. But also be able to solve is, now can I delegate this to someone, a decentralized authority to allow them to make decisions because they understand it and think like I do. That's the hardest thing to solve. And I want to understand how it is that you've gone about doing that as you've scaled the business. And the other thing that comes to mind in terms of describing this is this going back to my other lifetime as an organizational psychologist. It's the point that I often say from an onboarding experience, specifically managers and leaders, is you need to start onboarding them 90 days before you start expecting them to perform. And the reason why is part of that onboarding is not just around understanding the role, is you get them to shadow every single department and function of the company. Because if they're going to be in charge of decision-making and authority, they need to understand every part of the business intimately from what it actually happens on the ground there, instead of having this bird's eye view and making decisions off of hearsay and feedback and then the numbers that they see. They need to have an actual hands-on experience of understanding every single interface of the business and onboarding them through that, because if once they're up there, then that's a leader that you can trust because they understand the business as well. So that's for me is the practical hack, and it's really hiring the leaders and managers a couple of months before you need them.
Yeah. So I think, look, I mean, again, I think, like when you're dealing with a startup, like that is still, so maybe there's a lot of context as well that you need to put into this as well, right? So there's a company that you find that is clear in terms of like, now we're here, we're not changing our strategy, right? Here's a company, it's on track, it's going to roll out this many stores, it's going to do this, and things are going to go according to plan, right? And this actually happens a lot with mature businesses, right? Where a lot of things are not going to change quite drastically, right? So that is easy for you to actually go out there and say, we're going to look for this person. We're going to look for someone who's going to be a warehouse manager, who's going to look for facilities and go and get these things. But unfortunately, in a startup, it doesn't work like that, right? In a startup, things can change tomorrow. I might actually need a guy who was supposed to go and look for warehouses to go and be the head of security because people are stealing, right? And that's where it gets tricky, right? That's where it gets tricky in a startup because you're going through so many pivots, right? Like you are literally, like, in fact, a startup, a lot of people say a startup, they like to imagine a startup as uh, just a smaller version of a big corporate, right? But a startup is actually you
No, that's
every
not
day
true
when
at
you
all.
wake up, you're like, I need to find, yes. Like every day when you wake up as a startup, you are looking for a business model that's going to work, right? Every day you wake up, you are looking for a business model that's going to work. And what you need is like, you need people who actually can think like that. And there's not a lot of people as well who are going to think like that, right? So one of the things that are, for instance, I've seen maybe work so well is like, obviously, the people who like you start with as well, they actually become so critical to the business as well, right? Like, like, so for instance, I think one of the challenges we had from our side is when we started, I didn't have resources to hire the people that I would have loved to hire, you know? So, like, so for instance, I had family members, whoever that couldn't find a job had to come and work for me, because of that challenge of not
Mm,
having that team that you need. So I think for me, like for a startup, I would say the first thing that we need is that founding team is so critical, right? So
100%.
because that founding team understands a lot of things as well over time to say, oh, this is how we do this, right? So, I mean, to give an example, for instance, one of the things as we're scaling our business, right? And logistics can be a very hard business. It's a tough thing to do, right? And I was looking around, like thinking like, who can I get? At the time, like now it's like our business is starting to do like 1,000 orders a day. Now you're like, oh, now as we're getting these, like we're struggling. You can see that like a day, some days we are failing orders, we're not delivering. And then, and then I interviewed a lot of people, like external thinking like them. Like clearly we don't have the expertise. We're not going to be able to do this, right? And then somehow I was like, no, man, I think let me look around in the business, And one of the lady I picked there, she was one of the ladies who started as a shopper in the business, right? Um, and she was actually to hold it together. I mean, today we scaled to like over 5,000 orders a day, but she holds it together, right? So to me, I think what I learned from that is like the the people that start with you are so critical because also like you as a founder, you are able to give them enough attention. It's so good now to say, as a big company is growing, you're gonna be able to give everyone like you sit with them, you explain stuff. But I don't think it's even practical. You're not gonna be able to do that as the business is scaling, and that's where you start to have challenges in terms of like how do you spend enough time in customer service to tell people what's the right thing, what did I do here, and how did I do it. So I think that context that I want to speak about is that in terms of like that founding team becomes so critical, right? Like those guys then can help you, right? But also, like, yes, you're quite right that, like, now when you are scaling, you also have to be patient as well, right? You can't expect that someone's going to
and
come
focused.
and then within a month, 2 months, 3 months, and understand exactly how your things are supposed to work. So you need to allow them time, and you also need to really understand that you're going to have to be the person. Like, if they fail, right, they're failing because of you. Right? They're not
Mm.
failing. A lot of these people are not failing because they're not good enough. They are failing because maybe you as a leader are just expecting magic. You see, you said, you know what, like and then these are some of the mistakes that you make where you think, oh, now I'm just gonna hire a head of something, and then I'm gonna relax now, right? And stay at home and have
No, no, no,
coffee.
no, no, no.
But
Yeah,
then you forget that
I need
actually,
a COO or an operations manager or a commercial director, and they're going to take over my job, and it's all going to be better.
yeah, and unfortunately, it doesn't work like that, right? So, like, it might look like it's working, but hey, if you've been doing these things, and that's why I think for you as a founder, you need to be very clear about like what has been the critical thing that I've been working on, right? And understand that if you were to take that away and give it to someone else to do, right, it's gonna be it's like a big job. It's like it's massive, and most of the time, it's actually not. I will not even advise anyone to say, come take the critical thing. And, that's like you exiting. And that's why when people buy your company as well, they'll say you must stay here for 5 years. It's for that same reason that it's actually extremely difficult to do those
Yes.
critical things that we've been doing as a founder. And I think that's where also like when I spoke about like management led companies versus like founder led companies, that's where also you start to have this confusion of like, you know what, like I should be able to hand over stuff within a month, 2 months, whatever. Because there's a lot of books as well that says that, right? But the reality is like that's not how it works.
So I 100% agree with you. And when you're a startup, it's about moving fast and breaking things. I think in my experience with our clients, there is this point when you have a management and leadership team and the game kind of needs to change. And how you operate and your skill set as becoming a CEO needs to shift in being able to build this out. And before I go down an absolute rabbit hole of explaining how strategy solves that, because again, we're operating in a space where someone hears the word strategy, they think McKinsey and corporate. It's not a space for entrepreneurs and startups and scale ups. But I'll leave that for other material because this is the founder files, not Metavolve. But the point there is having the clarity that other people can execute on, that you can trust to delegate and decentralize authority is absolutely crucial. You can't scale without that. So practically speaking, how did you manage to do that? You have the core founding team. You've gone to now having 150 people, which means leadership and management layers. How did you build those layers out? And how did you pick the right people, get them up and running, take 90-day onboarding times into a week, and do all of these things to make sure that they're ready to execute?
Yeah. I think, look, I mean, from our side, in fact, what has also been interesting is like, I'll say, with Zulzi, I'll say we were two businesses, right? So there's tech business, right, that support checkers, and then there's one for dark stores, which is like very, very like, I'll say like every day things are changing. And funny enough, like when I look at these two businesses, they also require different mindset, right? So for instance, when I look at the
They're
tech
two different business
business,
units. They're two different, they need
yeah,
completely different strategies and ideas, and they've got different customers, they've got different capabilities required. It's like a different business.
yeah. So on the other side, the tech business has been easy to put together the right structures in terms of like, having guys look after developers and execute well. And it's very clear the plan there is this, right? And it doesn't change that much, right? If the plan there is to say you're going to have 35 resources to do this, that is solid. Nothing changes there. But on the one hand, it's a different thing altogether, right? So, and when I say the different thing altogether is also the way this thing changes. And that's why, in fact, one of the things that I would also say, on the other side, you also have to be careful about like not assigning big titles from the beginning, because that thing's going to change so quickly, right? So on the one hand, like you could wake up today, you are doing 1 million, and then the following day you are doing 20 million rand, and things are falling apart, right? So if you have already maxed out on titles, like what's going to have to happen is you're going to have to demote people, right? And then or automatically cause people to be unhappy, right? So those are the things that you just have to be careful of in terms of like, like when you're running a big, like let me say like something where it's solid and you know where you're going 2-3 years from now, you can even define that whole plan and it will look like that. Then there it's easy for you to say, these are the structures, these are the people I'm going to have. But on the other hand, where things are changing so rapidly, there's competition. So for instance, I gave an idea of Zulzi, like we used to pick from stores. One moment we're picking from a dark store that require, and you as a founder have to be there, right? So you have to lead from the front and make sure that wherever that's coming in, right, find you there as well, right? You have to train together as a team, do things with them, right? Obviously, you get to a point where you can say, now things are stable. Now I've grown. Now is great. But also among these people, who is then capable to lead these things going forward, right? So I think those are the things that you just always have to make sure you've got a very good balance of, right? So again, I think on the other side of Zeus now, I think we've got like, let me say, we've got the structures, I've got a head of ops, I've got like, head of marketing, but what they know now is like, as much as those structures are there, it doesn't stop me from going down and say what's going on here and asking questions, So you sort of like have to check that. So it should not be like and by the way, when you start doing that as well, they get to learn as well, right? They get to understand that, that's why I can't just sit here and think things are like this, right? So I actually like to get into details, If you tell me, I remember there was a time where people would say, we're discontinuing these products. they're not selling. I like to question, why aren't they selling? Why is this thing showing it like this? And most of the time when you ask those questions, you find that people don't know, right? Then you have to go down and say, how do we get that information that will allow us to do this? And that's why I think during that time, it's so important that people then get to, so whoever is there in the company, get to learn the right things, right? And as the company scales, then you can say, these are the people that can be given these things to fulfill, right? So I think for me, a startup, I think is so critical that, you as a founder definitely have to get the hands dirty all the time. And obviously you have to develop the people as well that we have with you, right? So developing them and being patient is very, very critical, right? And I think for me, like if there's one thing that in fact I wish I had at the time as well was if I had raised enough capital when I started, but not too much about so I can expand and do these things. So I can have people who can grow with the business so they can know that this is how you run this is how you do this. So that they are fit to take this thing to the next level. Those people, what I've seen is often you can't replace them, right? You can't replace people like even developers, people that actually we had to go and handpick to say, you start with us, right? They get to understand a lot of things about it's not just coding only. It's about understanding what are the complaints from the customers. So for instance, like my team, for instance, there were times where, developers as well, they've got, they always think of things. You say, I want to do my way. I want to do it my way like this. And sometimes you'll sit in the office, you're arguing about things. And I'll be like, no, actually, just because now you're arguing, let's just go and see how the shoppers are using your app. Let's go together. We go, we drive. When they get there to the shopper, they see how they're using it. Immediately they go back and say, hey, now we need to fix this crap. So building that culture of, of just really trying to make people understand how you solve this problem. I think it's such a critical thing, right? In wanting to build a successful business that can scale.
Well, I think the point is it's being able to get your hands dirty. It doesn't matter what your title is and your seniority. I think also what I laughed is, to your point, was if you're a marketing team of one person, don't have your job title head of marketing, right? Because it doesn't make sense in terms of as you scale the business. Same thing in terms of if you're a one person ops team or a two people person ops team, having a head of ops doesn't necessarily make sense. It doesn't allow for meaningful change and growth as the portfolio changes. But
yeah, sorry to cut you off. Also with that, I think it also needs to link back to your vision, right? In terms of how do you want this thing to be big? You get it? Because also you find that at times if your vision is actually bigger, right? Even if you do have a team of 5, but if your vision is actually saying, I want to have a business that's on a scale to 100 billion, right? Then the question becomes when you're at 1 million, then are you closer to your vision? Because sometimes you find that, yes, it's a big company, but you're not close to your vision. And that then becomes a problem when you start having those titles. So maybe it's fine to have a head of something if you are already close to your vision. You are close to you think you're successful. Your aim was to make 1 million rand a day, right? Or 1 million rand a month, right? So I think you just need to tie those things together properly as well.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I think the nature of what we've been speaking out is this difference between being in startup mode versus scale up mode. Is that when you're in startup mode, it really is, moving fast. And it's just the titles don't matter now, but stuff like this is going to matter later. The planning doesn't matter now, it matters later. It's about execution. It's not about thinking forward. The only time you think forward is that when you've got something, like you pointed out, stable and something to lose, then you need a bit of a plan to how do you make sure that this thing is going to keep growing and scaling and other people can do it as well. When you're in startup mode, it's everyone gets their hands dirty, everyone gets in, and having clear job titles and descriptions and responsibilities and specific goals makes no sense. The business has specific goals. We're going to grow. We're going to make sure we keep doing that. And that's it. Is everyone on board? Cool, let's go. And let's figure out how we're going to do that.
Yeah.
So, Donald, look, thank you for the story. Thank you for sharing the conversation so much. Unfortunately, we've run low on time in terms of for what is that we want to be able to talk about here. And I think we got, as we do, got super passionate about the people side of our business and what that actually takes in our role as leaders within a company to make sure that that's that's working, and the fact that we're constantly being entrepreneurial, constantly being agile. But I think there's just one more topic I really want to get into about your journey, and it's just the point around the evolving into dark stores, because it's such a huge transition from having the pickers going to multiple stores to essentially integrating that supply into your own business. Like, that's a fundamentally different business. So just, can you just paint the picture of where that decision came from? And, we spoke about it offline, but why that was quite a lot harder than you thought it would be walking into it?
Yeah, look, I think, let me say, going into that, like pivoting from picking from the store. So picking from the store, in fact, you didn't have to worry about like warehousing systems, your inventory, the quality of the product. It, like we didn't have to worry about that. We just go to the store, pick the stuff, and go, right? On the other side, you have to worry about all of those things. You have to worry about the inventory. So, like, all of a sudden now you need to build extra systems to support that. And I think one of the other things that we also like at that time, in fact, like when we pivoted from from groceries to the other side, right? The assumption was like all those customers will come and then they will be here with us. They love us, so they will pivot with us, right? And we're wrong about that, right? And in fact, I think I wish we knew a little bit, but we just thought we could still keep some of it, right? So, but because of obviously like the retailers, in fact, the biggest retailer we had on the other side, it was like Woolworths, right? In fact, at our peak at the time, I think we were doing about 300 million rand a year, right? So a lot of those customers, in fact, they didn't go with us on the other side, right? So they remain at the other stores, and then now we had to build everything from scratch, right? And at that time, remember, like a 300 million rand business means you've got structures, you've got people understand exactly where things are going. But now you're pivoting to something completely different, right? And if I were to be fair, probably the only person who knew how to pivot was me, because I had done it a couple of times, right? I had done it with books, I had done it with dresses. So again, like this is like practical experience that I'll say I had actually gone through, right? So that became very challenging as well, right? In terms of like now here you're starting something from scratch. Like the truth is like whoever that you've hired for that specific function on the other side is it's not necessarily like they have to reapply again, so now
It's a very
how
different
do you
business
do
now.
this? It's a different business, yes. Like it's a very different business altogether. And I think if I were to say something, in fact, a lot of organizations need that as well, right? Remember, like we live in a in tech, there's a lot of things that changes all the time, right? Like remember when we started, I mentioned things like technology changes, there's these things, and the reason why a lot of these big companies, where there's got a lot of these structures, all of these things, but pivoting is so hard for all of them, right? And that's why you find that people come, they destroy, new players come in, and then they take the market share and everything because of that thing of how do you pivot, right? How do you pivot quickly? And for me, I would say like it was this one. This pivot was quite the hardest one I've ever done, right? Because now I was not just pivoting alone, right? I was pivoting with a lot of people behind me, right? So, you'll wake up one day, this person is working on a wrong thing. You're like, hey, you don't have to do this. I still remember we going to a point where, number one, you can see that there's a decline in sales. Like every month, sales are going down, right? And also the customers as well, they are not sure what the hell is going on with these things. This new app of Zulzi does not allow you to pick stores anymore, right? Because also like how we wanted to transition was more like, you're gonna bring in like, all these what do you call it? Like you start mixing products, like like you could buy some stuff from this store, but it's just a product. So you go into the app, you don't select the merchant, right? And going to a point where I realized actually we can't just like do it gradually. We just have to pull a plug, you know. And one day I woke up, I was like, you know what? Let's pull a plug. And it's always scary to do that, right? It's always scary to say, let's pull a plug, let's do things like this. But I had to do that. But even after you have done that, then you have to start working with the team to make them understand what are we doing, how are we building this, where are we going, right? So I would say like that pivot was quite challenging, and then of course you have to deal with like now I'm dealing with vegetables. Is it fresh? Is it good? So building like And again, like I don't know how to, I have to bring people who can come and assist me and making sure you can get the right person. And often it's also very hard for you to get the right person if you haven't really, if you've got no idea of what is this thing all about, right? So it also means that you have to get your hands dirty. You need to understand a little bit so that they can say, you know what, now I can go, I can get someone who can help me, right? So for instance, one of the things I had to do was also to look around to say, who can I get to help me to run ops for the stores, right? And I went as far as Ireland to go find someone from Aldi. He came in here, helped me with ops, right? And that was the right call because at the time I could see exactly what we need for this business and you can see exactly what you're struggling with. And you also time, you have done it yourself, but you can see that, yeah, you need something different, you know? So many things, even the tech, on the tech as well. In the early days, you know, like we prefer to build everything ourselves. But at that time, I realized actually now I have to change it a bit, you know, because I can't function without a warehouse system. And I need to find something today, not tomorrow, you know. So even though my beliefs were like, oh, build stuff, do things like this, it had to change, you know. So I think,
I love the I
look,
love
I
the
mean,
timing of that. You talk about warehouse system, and then suddenly we just hear the beep 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 of a truck in the background. It's you can't script that.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, those were the things that one had to go through, right? And pivoting to get to where we are now, right? So I think that was quite critical. And I think the first few months were critical for us to get this thing like working properly, right? By working properly, not looking to scale, because if we scaled quickly as well, would have just scaled those problems, you know. But now we focus a lot on like, can we get our systems to work better? Can we get our product offering to get better, you know? And I think we're now in a position where I'll say like we've actually built something where, you know, customers have really fallen in love with what we've built, right? But it took some time for us to get to that, you know.
100%, and of course, it always takes time. And I think also part of the story there is that one thing we don't realize, specifically as we become successful, we've been through our first growth curve, is that we don't realize when we're making assumptions because we're confident and we know it's the right call and we know it's the right strategy. But to your point, everything's in the execution. And so the thinking around are our customers going to follow us? How we're going to execute on this is we get bitten by our own lack of knowledge as we change. And the point is, I see this so many times that, especially when we get larger as a business, what we now seems like an idea or an opportunity is an entire growth strategy in itself that's going to actually shift the nature of the business. And to your point but this is why I love entrepreneurs, is because hold on for dear life, right? And we'll make this work. And we've pivoted once before, we'll do it again. And we need the right, we need a different person in. Cool, we'll make that person happen. We need the right support. We'll get that in accordingly, and we will get our hands dirty. And the thing is, if it's working, then it's great. I can take a step back. I can let people run. To your point, and exactly what I think you do really well is that when it's not working, I'm going to roll in, figure out exactly what's not going on, do it. I think also credit to your team. You're not going to do it alone. You'll do it with them. We'll figure this out together. And roll my hands up, roll my sleeves up. This is what's going on. Okay, cool. You can handle this now. I'm back out there. So Donald, I think what you've shared now is such an honest story about what it means to be an entrepreneur. One about the constant pivots, the constant lessons learned, the fact that the work never stops, and I think the fact that you built the business to where it is just testament to that. But now, just to wrap up the conversation, what's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
I think, maybe the why. Where are we going? Where are we going? Where's the world going? Right? What's going to happen next? Right? I think for me,
what's the future look like?
That's always. Yeah. So look, I mean, let me say, there's a lot of things that are changing in the whole world at the moment. Obviously, AI is taking almost everything. You know, like it's taking over everything that we do every day. I think the way in which people want to shop is also quite changing, quite radical, right? Whether if it's groceries, food delivery, all of these things, I think there's a massive shift that I'm seeing. And when you see, in fact, the shift most of the time is actually driven. You see a lot of young people clamping into it first, right? Then you can immediately see that there's a massive shift. I see a big shift in terms of also how people want to consume uh, things, right? So if you think about things like video is actually becoming more like prominent, right? So the question is like, like what I'm asking myself now is, how do people want to shop groceries in the next 5 to 10 years, right? Do they still want to shop the same way they've been shopping it now? How do they want to shop for food, for instance, right? Do they, if you think about the Uber Eats, Mr. D, like as much as they will have 1,000 restaurants in there, but people keep on going to the same shops to shop for them. And why is that? And I think video will play major role in that, and those videos together with like AI. And a lot of people, when they think of AI, they think of robots. But I tend to think of AI as, like just even pure software, right? How things get recommended to you. I think there's going to be a massive shift in that, right? In fact, like already what we're seeing, in fact, even in the other, what do you call it, like media industries. If you think about like your TVs, how things have evolved. There was a time where people used to think like, oh, maybe it's Showmax, Netflix taking all these customers, right? But they forgot that there was the likes of TikTok that are actually taking over the customers from your Netflix and your Showmix, right? So, so being able to see that shift, right, where I think a lot of people now, for instance, like they could be watching TV, but they're on their smartphone, right? And the TV itself as well has not evolved that much, right, to compete with a smartphone. Again, like there's a technology problem on the other side. As much as you can do the software, but the TV to operate it is not the same as a smartphone. So there is that shift that I'm seeing now in terms of like definitely video. And of course, in South Africa as well, we're getting more high speed internet. If you look at like the fiber happening, rollout is happening at like amazing speed, right? So all of these things I think will have consequences on how customers want to consume things, how they want to buy things, right? I can literally say, like, I think in the next 4 or 5 years, you're going to see a lot of people wanting to buy stuff through a video where I can see exactly like the quality of the stuff that I'm buying. So I can actually know that this thing is the right thing. So, yeah, so I think for me, that shift is going to be happening very quickly. And I think as also we want to be right there, right? Definitely healthcare as well is one area where I think there's definitely a lot of massive things that we're seeing there. I think the healthcare space has not been transformed with technology. It's been very manual. Whatever you do, you go to a pharmacy, you're sick, they still expect you to go to the pharmacy. You get there, you must still do a co-payment and go in queue, right? The way even the pharmacist works today is like they spend 30 minutes, and pharmacists, by the way, earn a lot of money. They spend 30 minutes helping one customer, right? And all of those things is because there's no technology, right? That could help all of them, right, to do things even much faster. And I see that shifting very quickly as well. And that's one area that I think we're also like keeping a very close eye on. How can we be the guys who drive the change that is coming in that space? So I would say like there's going to be a lot of opportunities, like there's going to, as things are shifting more to AI, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for everyone, right? And I think people, you just have to obviously keep your eyes open. Of course, we're also going to see a lot of increase in like in things like fraud, fake things as well online. And that's why, in fact, in my opinion, I think the more there's more fraud than fake stuff, right? Because people can actually now make a picture of you and say you were here, right? So that means then you have to start thinking about like how do you prevent that online, right? And that's why, in fact, things like even video and all of these things, sound, whatever, will sort of like somehow like show some things that actually you can believe this because it's this person. And we're already seeing it as well with other platforms trying to tighten up things to say, what, like now, for instance, you can't just easily get an app store. They need so many documents, right? Because they realize that like if they don't do it now, it's going to become very difficult to protect one's identity. So that shift, I think, that is happening now, I think it's going to change a lot of things. And I think what's so important as well is definitely to think about, like, if you think about where we are in the e-commerce space in South Africa, it's still early days, right? We haven't done anything yet, right? So there's still going to be major disruptions that are coming here. And I think one needs to really, you can't say there's already a winner now, right? I don't think there's anyone who has won yet because the numbers don't tell us that, right? In terms of like the penetration of e-commerce is still very, very low. So I expect that to accelerate very, very quickly, and all of that will represent opportunities, right? And I think the real winners will be the guys who keep on innovating, guys who are not sitting down and say, you know what, we've already won, right? We won the game, they won't even start it, right? So I will say like now, as things stand, we are 2 minutes into the game. Where's the 90 minutes game? We're just 2 minutes into it. And the real winners will be the guys who will be innovating consistently, looking at how the world is shifting, right, and moving with it, right? Looking at like, for instance, when I go back to the Netflix story, for instance, there was a time we used to enjoy movies, those long 2-hour movies, right? But now people don't do it, right, anymore. Because of what? Because we are so exposed to so much content, right? Yeah, there was a time when Netflix, when they came in, because they came in with these things of series, all of those things, they were short and people liked them. But now there's even shorter videos for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then also like when a customer comes as well, what are you showing them, right? So when you go on TV, for instance, what do you see on TV? What do you see on DSTV? Are you showing me something that I like, right? That I can watch, because you're competing with all these other people. And that's where machine learning, AI, it's so critical for these businesses to say, because you're competing for attention, so you can't be going there wearing some useless things when you want to be seen, so are you actually giving your customers the best look where they can say, you know what, this guy, we're interested, we want to see more of what he has to offer, right? And that's what we're faced with today, right? In terms of like, more players coming in here, and again, like with technology, it's not like it's segmented or it's only South African companies that are allowed to come here, right? We're already seeing it in clothing, where like your Temu, Tima, Price are down, are already here in the country, your Shan, all of these guys, right? So all in all, it's like I see like a massive revolution all over the world, and I think people have to wake up and say, how do we actually make sure that we are leading this revolution from the front, right? And I think for me, that's one thing that I'm keeping my eyes open to say, I don't want to miss out on the next revolution, right? I think it's going to create a lot of amazing things, more opportunities, but people have to wake up and really take advantage of those things. So I really think like the opportunity is going to be big, but the one has to roll up the sleeves and work, right, in order to realize it.
If I may summarize that, don't get complacent. Constantly keep an awareness and understanding of your market and your customer and how they're behaving and what their preferences are, and never stop innovating.
That's it. That's it. So you have to keep going.
Donald, thank you for being on the Founder Files.
No, thank you. It was my pleasure, and thank you so much for the time as well.
Sure, cheers. I can't wait to continue watching the journey of Zulzi and how you incorporate video-based AI into e-commerce with groceries. When that happens, I can't wait to see it. Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, definitely. You're going to see more stuff from us. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for your time.
As you can tell, Donald is an absolute purebred entrepreneur, and no matter what the chaos of scaling brings to him, he's got the confidence and conviction to power through. But if you're one of those people that's really struggling with the chaos of scaling your business right now, well, that's the reason why many of Metavolve's clients choose us. Our strategy development program is deliberately built for entrepreneurs like you who want to take the chaos out of scaling their businesses. We've taken many of our clients from plateauing for a few years to growing revenue by over 20% in just 6 months, with net profit increases of up to 63%, and many of our clients getting to take a holiday and actually switch off for the first time whilst their business keeps growing. My team and I will take you through a structured process to help you not only overcome your scaling issues, but also create a holistic strategy tailored for your business. A strategy that's easier for your team to understand, talk about, and execute. By the end of it, you and your team will have a clear roadmap to grow faster and more sustainably. We're so confident in the value that we provide that if after 3 sessions you don't see the impact, you will get your money back. Are you ready to grow your business more sustainably? Well, visit metavolve.co to book a 30-minute introductory call with me to see how we can help you take the chaos out of scaling. And before you go, remember to like, comment, share this podcast with your network so other people like you can receive incredibly valuable stories from entrepreneurs like Donald. So until next time, cheers.